hit that magical record button and give myself a semi-professional countdown. In 3, 2, 1. Hello, the internet. Matthew here for another stupendous episode of Something Creative. I have for you all today, right now, this very, very creative person is so busy, so many projects, an incredible writer, a dude with a really awesome voice, I have to say. WrittenWritRalf, thank you so much for being here, buddy.
I appreciate that. I love when people say a lot of stuff about my voice. It's been years in the making, and I want to thank my parents for making it possible.
Dude, all right, so I'm going to backtrack to maybe about a year and a half ago. I was at In Beyond Con. It was being hosted at Hofstra. And there is just this big, bright, beaming smile and beard, a bearded smile just come over to me. And we just started talking, and it was chatting like we knew each other. In fact, I got so confused. I thought we did know each other, and I just forgot. You're an incredibly friendly dude. You're a great sight to see when there are physical live events, of course. And you've been in the cosplay and the geek nerd scene for quite some time. You're all over the place. You're talking to creative people yourself. You've got your own show. I want to delve into all of that. But of course, the whole point of this show is to talk about the why behind all of that. But before we get to the why, let's talk about the what. My man, what do you have going on here today?
Well, I am WrittenWritRalf, and we are here at the set of the show WrittenWrit, which I host. And my show is all about making this journey together to become better writers together. So I found out as I was looking through all these writing books that I've ended up acquiring over the years, is that the books give you an idea of how to write, but they don't show you how to write. So it leaves it up to you to figure out what writing is. And then I was like, okay, so if I'm making this journey by myself here, maybe there's other people out there making the journey to become better writers, and they don't know which way to go. So I decided, let's make a whole show about it and call it the WrittenWrit. And the show is you and I and you making the journey together to become better writers.
Fantastic. Now that's just the most recent project. You've had a string of projects. You have a show going on as well, right?
Well, yeah, besides
another
the
show,
writ,
I mean.
Yeah. Besides the WrittenWrit, I am part of the Bitten Apple TV, because we're supposed to be a network of shows coming out, trying to make it happen. We started off with my show and my partner Cadma's show, about her quirky acting life, and my writing show. And it was supposed to be 5 different shows, but stuff happens, people leave, people change their minds. Exactly. So it turned out into being just me and her. And then we started forming a group together. And now what we do as the Bitten Apple is we go to conventions and we try to cover the people who don't get much press, the creators, the writers, there's so much talent out there that doesn't get seen by the normal eye because everybody's paying attention to the bigger names.
Right. Yeah.
So we wanted to showcase all these people we see that are trying to make the dream happen. We wanted to take a bite out of the apple, which is why we're the Bitten Apple.
Bitten Apple, yeah. I love it, man. I love and I love that, because those who don't know, I mean, everybody has a tribe, or they can at least try to connect to a tribe. And Seth Godin, of course, talks about this a lot. But there's something about the geek/nerd world where there's both, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, where there's simultaneously this deep-seated, almost visceral sense of camaraderie,
right,
and bitchy cattiness and queenie kind competition and just bullshit.
This
Politics.
stuff just goes hand in hand. Have you ever seen a Star Trek guy talk to a Star Wars guy?
Talking quotation marks. No. But it seems to get worse when you have the Star Trek people, you know, when the Picard people and the Kirk people and the Archer and the Janeway people.
Oh, they all start fighting. Mine is better than yours. Come on.
Yeah.
I have the better series. I have the better series.
We have better technology. Anyway,
Exactly.
we're gonna go off on a nerd tangent, and half the audience is going to fuck off. So let's get back on task. This is why I like you, man. It's so easy, so easy. All right, so you have this, and again, no, seriously, I love the concept. I love the concept of taking all those little bits and like kind of mother henning them all together. What are you, just naturally altruistic, or you just saw a marketing opportunity? Like, where did that come from?
It's funny. I've been a nerd and a geek all my life, and I live in this environment. And I just, I wanted to go and do this and showcase the stuff that I was seeing while I was in these conventions. You know, over the years, you do the conventions, you go to the conventions, you see all these beautiful things. You know, not even going to talk about the fact that it used to be a comic con and now it's more of a movie con. But you know, you go and you find all these little gems, and I wanted to showcase these little gems I kept finding out there. You know, we started off with another organization before this, so we've been doing this for years, but we've been Bitten Apple TV for 5 years now.
Okay. Wow, that number always seems to come up. 5 years. People start a project and it's always like 5 years. Really takes things time to really come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
So now before that, I know you don't strike me as the kind of guy who just all of a sudden finds inspiration. You seem like a person who kind of lives this. Am I reading you correctly?
Oh,
Writing,
definitely.
creativity? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you do before Bitten Apple TV?
Before Bitten Apple TV, I was let's go back a little bit.
Please.
When I was in college,
Mm-hmm.
I decided that I want to be a broadcaster. So I studied broadcasting. And then for a bunch of years after that, I didn't do anything with it. Because you know what happens? You come out of college, you get a job, the money's enticing. Next thing you know, you're working this job. Next thing you know, it's 10 years later and you haven't done anything of what you were supposed to be doing. You know, so then a friend was like, dude, go get back into broadcasting. I'm like, it's been years since I did anything with it. You know, what am I supposed to do? And I was like, just do whatever you want to do. And I started doing, what do you call it? Extra work.
Okay.
Started doing extra work. So I started to dip my foot into it. I started tossing my voice here and there for voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
I started to work things and see if I liked the industry. And the more I liked the industry, the more I wanted to be in it. Then I started to help people behind the scenes in their projects.
Mm-hmm.
Then I joined another organization that was doing the same thing that we're doing, which is going to the cons and showcasing, well, not just the cons, expos, a bunch of different things, which is the same thing we do. We don't just cover the conventions, we cover pretty much everything. We're taking a bite out of the apple, which is how it started, which is all the stuff that's in New York or the tri-state area, and we're showing it to you.
Right.
So that's the short end of the stick of how I got to where I am now.
Okay. But I want to know was it more organic, like you saw the need and just felt the need to like extract these little gems, or is it more of like part of that camaraderie, like, hey, we should all get together and showcase each other? Or was it more just like, hey, you know, other people need to see this? Which end was it? Pure curiosity or altruism?
It's funny that you say that, because what ended up happening, especially when we formed the Bitten Apple, because we were sitting down at a diner after,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was after Comic-Con,
Mm-hmm.
and we're sitting down at a diner after Comic-Con.
Mandatory.
We were like, you know what? I'm tired of doing this stuff for other people.
Okay.
Why don't we just get together, form a network, and then do it ourselves? You know, and then this way we can showcase our own projects,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time showcase what we want to showcase. Because sometimes when you're in another organization, they want you to cover what they want you to cover.
Right. No creative control.
And then sometimes you'll see something and you're like, dude, I want to do an interview with them. And then, you know, depending on who you're with, it's going to be like, well, no, that's not going to work for us. I'm like, oh, or they're not going to get us any views. I'm like, I don't care if they get us views. I want to showcase what they're doing.
Right.
And it came to the point where I wanted creative control. We all wanted creative control of what we were doing. And at the same time, we wanted to do our own thing and push ourselves forward.
Right. You know, it's funny. I don't think people outside of New York, of course there are diners outside of New York, but I don't think people outside of New York really understand how many great ideas were birthed around a diner table by over-exhausted, very hungry, creative people. Because there's something about getting out of a con, it's mandatory. You have to go to a diner afterwards. It's like law. Unless you have a long drive, in which case then it's drive-through in the car to the diner.
Well, sometimes is let's drive to the diner, all hang out after the con, then we all go home separately.
Yeah. Yeah, half costumed up, you know, hair's out, clearly out from under a wig cap press is still on.
You know it. You know that joy of going to a diner that has nothing to do with the convention place you're in, and you go in costume,
or half a costume.
Are like, what the? Why is Storm sitting here? Why is Captain America over there?
And that really comes down to the nature of the community. The way, and there's something special about Geeks and Nerds. Like I love talking to creative people. Like, you know, I interview like painters and musicians. There's something about Geeks and Nerds, cosplayers in general, where there's just the sense that you're viscerally living it. So when I created Hero's Breath, I wanted to make something about, make a brand to really encourage people to delve into their own story and see the power that lies there. And that's actually what drew me into cosplay, was to kind of exemplify that. And it was so easy. It was so easy to just embody that character and to see it reflected in other people. And that's kind of where I would lead the conversations. It was like, so do you do realize why you're always cosplaying Han Solo, right? Like kind of like take people apart a little bit that way. Do you ever see the same thing when you're working with people in writing? Like they're just writing a story and then you see, it's like, you know, you're constantly going over the same tropes. Is everything okay at home? Like, do you ever like get that chance to kind of like delve into people's psyche like that? Or do you not dip your toe into that water?
It's funny because one of the ways that I got into writing, one of the ways that I improved my writing was by doing role-playing games, especially what you call it, pen and paper role-playing games, where you know Dungeons and Dragons, Vampire the Masquerade,
tabletop stuff,
and you're exactly what you're saying starts to happen. People will play characters, and they'll play characters that have something to do with themselves, and you're like, you know why you're playing that character. And it's like, Rob, stop overanalyzing things.
Well, it's supposed to be fantasy. Stop revealing yourself. Stop bringing reality into it. But we can't. We can't, can we?
No, because you, especially as a writer, you know, one of the things you do is you break people down. You start to see what's going on because, you know, they're all, technically speaking, everybody's a character. And that's the way you see it. You see the depths of the character, and creating a character should be like having a real person. You know, it should be the whole beautiful beings that we meet every day, and we want to create them so they're alive. You know, and that's why you know, when I tell people, when you're creating your character, when you're writing this character that you are so much a part of, you really want to make them live. You want to take all the bits and pieces and go, well, this is why he does this. This is why he does that. You know, a person is not just good because they're good. There's some people like that, but it's not the way it works. And the person is not evil because they're evil. The hero's journey has to happen. Now, what happens at the end of the journey, whether you're a hero or a villain, that's a whole different thing.
Right. Right. And see, now you're opening that can of worms on me. Because I had this conversation. So I used to do a podcast with my partner, Tom, and we had gotten into that. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit on the idea that I mean, sometimes a villain is transformed by something that happens to them.
Exactly.
And sometimes, and this is what most people do. Most people are, as Mel Robbins, she's a motivational coach, although she hates the term motivation. And I agree with her, that oftentimes we just keep hitting the snooze button on our life. That call to adventure comes in and we put it to voicemail.
Oh, definitely.
Or we leave it on red, you know? And so we were talking about the fact that some villains come out of, or they emerge out of their own sense of disappointment that they didn't do X, Y, or Z in their life. And now they're bitter and angry about it. That's like the bitter divorcee that constantly tells every young person not to get married. It's like, you're the villain of somebody else's story right now.
Exactly.
You're hampering love because you have regret.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's a lot of people like that, I think, in the world. And if they had just accepted the hero's all the pain and suffering and heartbreak in that big, long, loopy cycle, it would have had more pain, but so much fun. Do you find yourself at any point, because obviously I do, do you find yourself at any point trying to like shake people, trying to get them to come out in while you're talking with them about their writing?
Every once in a while, you know, you run into somebody who was writing. Let's use an example. They're writing really dark stuff, you know, and you'll be like, "Oh, you sure you're okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine."
Octaves go up.
And you know, I don't know. As a person who suffers through depression, you know, that's one of the first warning signs is like, "Oh, I'm fine," or "I'm okay." These are terms that depressed people use because they don't want to talk about whatever they don't want to talk about. I'm not saying that everybody does it, but I'm saying that anybody who usually goes, "I'm okay," is telling you what you want to hear. You know, so you know that's when you start to like pick at people. Some people open up. Some people go deeper into their den of despair.
Yeah.
You know, but I always try to reach out because I understand as somebody who suffers through it that, you know, all you need sometimes is somebody to like talk to.
Right. That actually reminds me of what Dr. Jordan Peterson said in his book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, that, you know, he's a psychologist and people come to him all the time. And he says 90% of a session, a therapy session, is listening. And then they say, "Oh, doc, you know, you helped me so much." And he says, "You know, you can end up sounding really smart if you just shut the hell up." So,
well, you know what they say? You know, it's better to stay silent than reveal yourself to be the fool that you are.
who was that? I'm going to put you on the spot. Who was that? I know that was somebody.
Well, the quote itself is said in a whole other way.
Okay.
I cannot remember who says the quote, but I do paraphrase it a lot.
No, I've heard it before too, and now it's gonna stick in my craw. It's gonna niggle in the back of my head, and I'm gonna deal with it later.
Well, you know how it is, man. Now we got Google, and we can go Google it.
All right, so where do you? No, that's not the question I wanted to ask. All right, so you're at this point where you're writing with people, and I've seen you on TikTok, and you've done it on Instagram as well. You're just kind of taking ideas and suggestions. Do you end up working with people more one-on-one, or is it more just kind of out there to the internet kind of thing? Like, where are you at right now?
Well, when I started the show, I started off explaining word of the day, writer's prompts.
Yeah.
And, you know, as time progressed, I tried challenging myself more and more and more and more, which is what I've always liked to do, is challenge myself to write, especially when somebody gives me a challenge. So now, what you're saying one-on-one, what started to happen was like, all right, you challenge me, and then whatever it is you want to do, whether you give me a word, a phrase, a picture, I will do something with it, and I'll create a story. And that was the original challenge. The original way we worked things out. Right. Then I was like, okay, so, you know, let's up this thing up again. If you guys want to work with me, one or two of you give me something and put it together, and I'll take the whole thing and put it together.
Okay.
Then I started doing double challenges, which is I started with creative people like artists and writers, and I said, well, let's challenge each other. You know, I'm going to write something, and you're going to do something with it, or you're going to create something, and I'm going to do something with it. And then the double challenge. See where this is going? Yeah. Happened where we're both going to do something, and then we're both going to react to it.
Right.
And I did one with Shadow Rabbit. I always have to mention Shadow Rabbit.
Love the guy.
And this is what I've been working on for a while. This is Hugbert, my superhero teddy bear. Dude. And he brought this to life in such a way that he's been helping me create the book.
So you're making is it a kid's book or what? What are you making out of that?
It's a kid's book, comic book type of thing. I've never thought that talking down to children is the way to go. I talk to them like they are people, and I feel like you don't talk down, you just explain things and see what happens. Right. So I'm going to make the book. I'm going to talk at my level, and the way it usually works, children will understand what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah, they always pick up on that. I love that. Is there a website or anything I can drop down right now, or is it all...
Not yet. We're working towards the Kickstarter.
Okay.
Right. And as soon as we're at that point, I'll let you know.
Definitely let me know. I will definitely bounce it because I think that's awesome, and I would definitely like to see more of that. I know my daughter would probably love that. All right, so you're growing something, my man. You're growing a community. You're acting kind of like the glue for the community that's already there, and it has the potential to grow. You're connecting with people, which is obviously much more important than the size, any numbers in particular. Is this where you saw these things going, or is this kind of like we're just doing what you like to do, and then you're like, holy shit, something's happening?
It's funny because one of the things that writers do, and it's one of the problems that writers have, is that they'll create, they'll write, and then they'll be like, no, somebody's gonna take this and steal it, and they're gonna use it against me. And what ends up happening?
My hard drive, haven't you?
You keep this stuff inside, and it never goes anywhere because one of the biggest things a writer needs is other voices talking to you, so you can see how you are progressing, how the story is going. Writers need writers so they can talk to each other. Yeah. It sounds weird, but it's true. You're writing a story, you want other writers to be able to chime in, or be like, oh, that was great what you did and went over there and over here, because it lets you know where you're going. Right. And it's funny that you're saying that, because the last big challenge I did was I started doing a live, let's write a story together. So everybody started chiming. I did a Facebook Live. Everybody started chiming in. They said, all right, we're going to throw all this stuff at you. And then I said, okay, I'm going to take all this. I'm going to come back at you. And then, I don't know if you can see it, but you can see if the board back there. Yeah. That's from the original ideas.
Okay.
And then I took all the ideas and I started to write a story and put it together. Okay. Then I came back in the next episode and I read a little bit of what I wrote. And I said, okay, this is where we are. Where are we going next? Okay. And then they threw more stuff at me, and it became this whole, we are writing a story together. The community is writing a story together. And then the goal for this will be to finally put it down and publish it.
I love it. It's so organic and really, again, interconnected. I have to keep throwing that word out there because you're really doing it. You're really living it, and it's come out organically out of you. Something almost visceral. So I'm gonna rewind the clock on you even further.
Go for
it. When did you start writing, or storytelling, or when did this start for you?
It's funny. I've been a geek all my life. I started collecting comics when I was really young. It was me and my cousin collecting comics for a long time. We partnered up. That way we can get more books. And then, as I read comics, I started going, well, no, let me rewind it even further.
Mm.
So when I was younger,
Hmm.
I started to read. And as I started to read, I started to, you start to pick up on what you like to read, what you don't like to read.
Yeah.
So as I started to read detective stories, Encyclopedia Brown,
Mm.
not that many people know who that is anymore.
I read one to my daughter. We had one. I don't even know where it is now.
And that led me to Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
I think it's back there somewhere. Yeah, there it is. So that led me to Sherlock Holmes, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did such a terrific job bringing this character to life. It feels like he's alive, when you read it. And as time progressed, I was like, okay, I want to write my own detective.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first thing that I wrote. I wrote my own detective, Maximus T. Jones.
How old were you when Maximus T. Jones came to life?
Probably 8 or 9. Maximus T. Jones started it off, and then I can say that I started collecting the comics, and the comics started. A lot of people tell you the comics are fluff, they're garbage, but the vocabulary I learned in comic books, especially when you're reading Fantastic Four and you're like the electromagnetic proc, and you're like, what? And that increased my vocabulary, that increased my love, and the next thing I know, it's like I want to write my own comics. And then I started creating my own comic books, my own heroes, my own universe, and it blossomed from there. By the time I was a young adult in my early 20s, I had created universe, destroyed them. They've had their own crises. And that's always stayed with me. The writing bug has always been with me, and it's the one part of me that's never changed.
Okay.
Whether I took the broadcasting and did something with it or not, I've always been writing.
And you think you'll always be writing?
Yeah, that's just part of the blood. It bleeds out of me, and a large part, and I'm happy about it because a large part helps me deal with the depression because it flows out into the paper.
Right.
I do a lot of poetry, which I feel like some writers like stick to one vein. I feel like I do poetry, I do stories, I dabble here and there.
I know what you mean. It's funny. The last few years, I've been writing mostly, what I call practical stuff. Blogs, and because I have a very analytical mind. But more so in the last few months, even before I started this interview series, I said to myself, I'm like, I gotta get my creative stuff going again. Like I haven't done anything with it. So I've tackled a little bit of free verse poetry and other, going back into my hard drive. I must have like 0.5 gigabyte worth of like story, just like snippets, ideas. I have one thing that since I was 16, this whole grand, epic, awesome story. I actually wrote a short story out of the universe off of it, which was really good. I have to say, I gave it to a few people and they're like, okay, yeah, it's good. Have I done anything with it? No, because it fits into like a larger spectrum and it's just been there. And I have started it and restarted it literally 13 times, maybe 15. So you're right. You are right when you say, because there's something about like looking at like a painter or a sculptor. They could paint over something, that they don't like. It's like, oh, everything was great, but I'm going to just rework this section. Or sculptor can add more clay and take more clay. When you're writing, that same carving and pasting and painting work happens, but it happens with words, which are each made of letters, which are much more intricate. And it's just so much more detailed. And if that part of your brain decides not to work that day or that week, you're done. So how do you deal with that, I want to say, neurological inconsistency?
So the one thing I have never suffered, and I will knock on wood, is writer's block.
Okay.
Only because I definitely think I'm probably ADHD, and it's probably been with me all my life. And it would explain a lot of the things I do and a lot of the energy I have, but also with the blessing comes the curse. And my problem is I have too many stories. So, the whole thing is to focus on one story or two story and get it done.
Mhm.
One of the, and then a lot of people have the other issue, which is they can't write.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, the whole point is that you need to write in order to write. Sounds stupid. I know everybody's like, what are you talking about, Ralph? You're talking gibberish there.
I get it.
But no, if you are writing, even if it's a list, even if it's a laundry list or a shopping list or something, it starts to flow. The pen starts to flow onto the paper. The fingers start to type on whatever it is. You start a flow. And I'm like, do that once a day at least, and it'll get you flowing. It sounds stupid, but it will.
No, that's actually based on neuroscience. Your brain can rewire itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I actually learned from while I was getting sober. I was actually delving into using videos, listening to motivational and personal development speakers, because I figured out fairly quickly on that that's really where I wanted to take my own future. And they kept coming back to that, the consistency of the habits, whether you're talking about like somebody like Mel Robbins or Peter Sage, talking about that, or you can go all the way back to, like Dale Carnegie or Napoleon Hill. You can go back even further, and you want to talk about Marcus Aurelius. You go back even further than that. You go back to Aristotle. It's this level of consistency. And now what modern understanding of the way the brain works is that when you have this habit and you get yourself to the point where you need to do it, then yeah, it just becomes visceral. It becomes part of your muscle memory. Like everything else, like dancing, like singing, like every other creative endeavor. And you seem to be very well tapped into that. Were you aware of that's the way the brain works? Or is it you're just following your instincts and, oh, look, that's the way the brain works?
I think one of the biggest things, one of the biggest influences in my life was I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching PBS.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the interview with Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
And I was really young and I watched the whole thing. It's a huge series. I forget how many it is. And I came back after watching the first time and hearing Joseph Campbell talk. He made me come back for the next interview and the next interview and the next interview. And the more I heard Joseph talk, the more I was like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I was already on my journey to write because I was already writing my own worlds. Mm-hmm. Now, here comes Joseph going, there's rules. There's things that have been happening since the beginning of time. There's mythologies that have been set in a certain way because it was written that way because it flows from everybody.
Sorry.
It flows from everybody. And you listening to that man talk was like amazing. And the more he talked, the more I was like, I want more. It opened up what do you want to call it? It opened up this abyss inside me that I didn't know I had, and I needed to fill it.
Okay, I am so sorry.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
So all right, so Joseph was really the one who kind of drew you into this form, this expression. And all right, I just want to make sure I understood you. Sorry, my daughter was calling me.
It's always the daughter. My daughter just popped up a little while ago.
Obviously, we're running over time. Obviously, we're running over time now. I'm going to have to wrap this up. You had said, you basically already answered what is, for me, the question that I always leave to every creative person that I get to interview. But what would you say to the person who is wanting to write, wanting to express themselves, and struggling? who wants to maybe make a career out of this, do something, what would you say to the person who's kind of at that threshold?
Well, first of all, even if you just want to write, let's take the whole aspect of publishing, of making money off of it. Let's take that out of the equation. If you want to write, write. The whole point is that anybody can write. And I know it sounds funny, and then people go, but Ralph, I don't have an imagination or this and that. What most writers do is they take life experience, and this is from what we were talking about before, and they use that life experience and they create their worlds with that life experience. I suffered through bullying when I was a kid. All of a sudden I have this story about how this kid gets bullied. It's just the way it works. And I don't want anybody to think that they don't have stories. They have stories. They just need to write them down. And again, I can't say enough about writing. Just write. Just sit down and write. Let the story come out of you and see what it is. You may not be a writer. You may not want to do this for the rest of your life. But there's different goals. I've yet to publish a book, but I am a writer and I enjoy writing. It bleeds from me. I'm not saying that I'm not going to publish. I'm just saying that at this point, I'm enjoying the process of writing. And that's the whole thing. Enjoy the process. Enjoy writing. Let the stories pour out of you. Just let it come out. Now, if you want to make money off of it, it gets even more intense. If you want to be a writer, this is where a regular writer, somebody who wants to write something, from a writer who becomes something else, this is the step you have to take. This is in your hero's journey. This is the barrier, and now you need to pass it, because in passing it, you will become your hero. And that's the whole thing, is to make sure that you do not let whatever wall, whatever hurdle, whatever gets in your way, get in your way. One of the biggest things as writers that stops us from writing is life, and things that keep trying to stop you from doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'd say jump over the wall, swim through the ocean, keep moving forward. The one thing that keeps me going, especially with depression, is my ability to keep telling myself, just keep moving forward.
Excellently said. Perfectly encapsulated. That was really good too. Raf, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I think you've added a lot of value to other people's journeys, to their stories. Really appreciated hearing more about your story and your journey. I thank you for opening up. Y'all got to go follow him. All the stuff's down below. The links are in the description. There's IG, all that other stuff has been dropped. So please make sure you're following WrittenWritRalf on all the requisite social media platforms. And from Matt and the WrittenWrit, I want to thank you for tuning in. Catch you in the next one. Take care, everybody.